Jason Calacanis, Inside.com founder, also joins us. Lots of discussion coming up.
Yeah, let's talk about Amazon. As you just mentioned, shares hitting all-time highs this morning. Third record in a row. This as CEO Jeff Bezos, speaking at the company's shareholder meeting yesterday, says now is not the time for complacency. The exact quote: "There's no rest. We cannot rest on our laurels," adding the competition is as fierce and challenging as ever. Speaking of not resting, Amazon plans to open the doors of a brand new bookstore in Midtown Manhattan, right on the site of what was once a Borders bookstore. Farhad, one of the questions is, are they trying to make money? Are they trying to rub it into these booksellers that they help put them out of business? What's the goal here?
I don't think they're trying to rub it in. I mean, I think they're trying to make money. That's what they do. Well, sometimes. I think they're testing it out. They're seeing, stores are good for some things. Like they're good for discovery. They're good for looking at electronics. They're good for, they could try out lots of sort of experimental things with, the checkout list store that they're trying out in Seattle. So those kinds of, they could try out a lot of things. They have a lot of money. And the thing about Amazon is they're most experimental of the big companies and the most, I think, willing to surprise. And this is another one of those surprises. Like, I wouldn't have guessed a few years ago that they would have opened a huge retail operation, and they are. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
Jason, this can't be about selling books, right? Because if it were about selling into some category, wouldn't they be selling clothes or something? Isn't this about the ecosystem showing, hey, you can buy an Echo, you can buy a Kindle, look at all this stuff that we can do when you tie it all together?
Yeah, Farhad's wrong that this is an experiment. This is a deliberate, very specific program. It's on-ramp retail. What they're doing is, there's a large number of people who maybe haven't actually become a Prime member yet. Maybe they haven't played with a Kindle. And this is Amazon's way to do on-ramp retail and also relationship retail. So if you look at what Apple did with their stores, you come in, you hit the Genius Bar, you don't know how to use the iCloud service, you don't know how to use Photos, you're not sure exactly what Apple TV is, and they educate you. And so it really services the people who are very specifically fans of your product and deepens and strengthens that relationship, but it also serves as an on-ramp to your entire ecosystem. If you look at Amazon Prime, if they were able to onboard, let's say, 2 or 3 dozen people per day in that store, which seems pretty doable, they could do that by offering discounts on the books that you get there at that moment in time. You're talking about generating tens of millions of dollars per store if you could convert, say, 50 people to Amazon Prime, because we all know the LTV of an Amazon Prime member's low thousands of dollars. So this is really about on-ramping more than anything. And consumers are embracing physical books again, which is a counter-trend to the social media cacophony of idiots. People want substance in their lives, so they're buying books.
Farhad, this is also an occasion for a lot of people to remind everyone that Sears started out as a mail-order thing, and then it became nothing but physical after a long time. Obviously, we don't think that's the case, but it also is a reminder that even though it looks like an exception on the retail strategy of Amazon, as a company, it has massive amounts of physical assets. It has all these huge warehouses. It's not exactly a little virtual business that just kind of runs on software alone.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Amazon is a huge software company, but it is like a massive presence in the world physically in a way that, like Google is not and Facebook is not, and even I think Microsoft is not. Like they have real stuff in the real world and they know how to manage those operations. I mostly agree with Jason. I guess the reason I call it an experiment is because a lot of things at Amazon start out as experiments, and they try stuff out and they're willing to shut things down. I'm not quite convinced that they're gonna have hundreds of stores at this point. I think it's still at a point where they're testing out dozens of stores and seeing how it works. It could it could end up huge like AWS or something, or it could also be like Amazon Fresh, which they've run for a long time in select cities, but haven't, made a huge thing at this point so far.
It'll be really interesting to see if they can beat some of these brick-and-mortar stores at their own game. Do want to move on, though, guys, and mention another rough morning for Uber. Just unbelievable. The company now says it plans to repay millions of dollars to New York drivers due to a calculation error that had to do with taxes. This as another key executive exited the company 7th one in recent months. This time it was Uber's general counsel for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa saying he's leaving for personal reasons. And then there's this. Hamish Douglas, the co-founder of Australian Magellan Financial Group with some $37 billion under management, says he thinks the ride-hailing service has less than 1% chance of surviving over the next decade. From his comments at the annual Stockholders and Financial Advisors Conference in Sydney, quote, "It's constantly losing money, and its capital-raising strategy is a Ponzi scheme." We've reached out to Uber, of course, for comment. So, Jason, you know this one's going to go to you. A Ponzi scheme for investors.
Yeah.
Respond.
I think it's kind of laughable, and if Hamish would like to make a long bet with me for $10 million, I'll bet my entire net worth that Uber will be here and thriving in 10 years. So it's kind of a silly comment. I'll replace Uber in his statements with Amazon or Google or Facebook, and I think that will be as laughable. So, you know, on the issue of New York drivers, I put this in the bucket of good news for Uber, which is if you look at that case in that instance, you have Uber making a mistake on calculating, and each market has a different calculation of how they tax, and each service has a different tax. What Uber did was they made a mistake in one market on one service, and they quickly are making it right. I put this in the bucket of good corporate citizenship and owning a problem and being transparent about it and working quickly to solve it. But a company that has reached tens of billions of dollars in bookings, it's kind of laughable to say that's not a real company. Obviously, this is a very real company, and the millions of people who take Ubers this week and the hundreds of thousands of drivers who collect checks this week would differ from our friend from down under.
Farhad, it's getting close to the point where Uber's taking so many hits and it is not dead yet that I'm starting to think maybe this is good for the company. I mean, we just had LinkedIn on last week saying people really want to work at Uber despite all these negative headlines. The alternative is Lyft, and Lyft certainly hasn't overtaken Uber despite the negative headlines. I mean, do you buy this, or do you think Uber's really in this for the long haul?
I mean, it's in this for the long haul. The question is whether riders and drivers stick with them. I mean, I think that Jason could be right. This could be a completely innocent mistake in New York. In fact, I'm inclined to believe it's an innocent mistake. But the trouble for Uber is that there's no sort of like, no one is willing to give it the benefit of the doubt anymore. There's no like massive goodwill for Uber. And I think that's the difference between, you know, Uber and Amazon and Google and Facebook. We all know these other companies are big companies and they make mistakes, and sometimes they do things in the interest of, they may not do things in the interest of consumers, but generally we sort of like give them the benefit of the doubt. They're like well regarded by customers, and I think that I don't recall another tech company that is as big as Uber that is sort of so vilified by even you know, even loyal customers. You know, feel kind of icky about using it sometimes. I think if they're in a bad place. Point,
yeah, I think it's fair that they've had a rough year, and when you have this much bad news, I think people are kind of piling on now. And what it's doing is, I think it's making the management team more resilient and more focused. And it's created a massive culture evolution at the company. So, you know, based on my knowledge, which obviously I have a little bit of inside knowledge, not complete, as an early investor, I am more bullish on the company than I've ever been, and more bullish on the management than I've ever been. When you're getting this kind of microscope on you, it really makes you focused. And if you look at Facebook, they went through, you know, some really tumultuous times, including the largest fine in the history of the FTC and a 20-year audit. So, you know, this isn't unprecedented. Microsoft was the most hated company on the planet for a period of time when they were going through their antitrust. So what's important is how does the management team respond? And they're getting there. I think they're really getting there and making progress. So I'm super, super bullish and obviously massively conflicted.
Yes, thank you for reminding viewers and listeners about your investment in Uber. Farhad, finally, you had an interesting column the other day on what you call the frightful five tech companies. We call it FANG, but Alphabet, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, asking readers, if you had to, which tech giant would you drop and in which order? So we wanted to indulge you. What did you learn from this exercise?
I learned that a lot of people would drop Facebook first, and I'm not sure whether to believe them, but in our poll, I think about almost 60% said they would drop Facebook first. I wonder if they're just sort of saying that, and they're completely addicted to Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook. And then a lot of people said, I think Google was the one that won for they would drop that last. Google and Apple and Amazon were pretty close there, which I can believe that.
I would drop Google first, as a matter of fact, because Google has the most analogs to something else I can use. I mean, maybe not quite as good, but I can use other stuff. Probably the last one I would drop is Apple. I mean,
because you love your consumer products.
Yeah. Hey,
Jason,
I use them every
what
day.
about you?
Yeah, so John's right that Google has, Microsoft and Apple as contemporaries that have duplicate product lines, so it's very easy to give up Google. When I hear that the majority of people say they would give up Facebook, that's to me like Lena Dunham or Rosie O'Donnell saying they're going to move to Canada if Trump is elected president. It's
no chance.
Completely fake news. Fake news, Farhad.
I don't know, Microsoft, maybe? I could get another Word document or another...
I was thinking practically, if you're in a
this
corporate environment, Microsoft's pretty indispensable. Yeah.
It has to be a bracket,
gotta leave it there.
Farhad. The next one, do a bracket where you put them heads up. Would you give up Amazon or Facebook?
Good idea.
And you obviously give up Facebook to Amazon. Google versus Amazon, you give up Google. So I think Amazon wins the day in a bracket system because they have the most unique product in the world.
Yeah, for me, they're the last ones. I'd find it the hardest to give up Amazon.
Yes,
Amazon wins it all.
Would have no way to get toilet paper. Guys, we've got to leave it there. Thank you. Farhad Manjoo, Jason Calacanis, always a pleasure.